Welcome back. Let's look at chapter 14 and see what it's talking about when it talks about graphics. Starting over on page 234, we have the introduction. There's a couple things on the introduction that we want to look at real quick. It's actually at the very top of it. It talks about the cost of doing business continues to spiral upward. Cost of doing business is something retailers have to look at nowadays. But at the same time, I talk about cost of doing business, you also have to look at the competition value. Can your window bring shoppers in and turn them into buyers more so than your competition? We're going to talk about cost quite a bit on this chapter, but you'll see why as we go through it. As we go through this chapter, make sure, please, to look at the photographs, the figures. They're actually not bad. And you'll see what we're talking about as we talk about graphics. Typically, and it started probably the beginning of this century, retailers were looking for ways to save money. And graphics is one of those ways to do it. So, looking over on page 235, we talk about graphic images. The key to a successful graphic presentation is the use of images, listen to this, that will attract attention. Too many times you'll walk through a store and you won't even see them. Just like a sign. You may not even notice a sign. You may not notice a graphic. If the shopper doesn't notice it and it doesn't turn that shopper into a buyer, was it really money well spent? So again, be cognizant of how much you're spending on the graphics and is there a return on that investment. We're talking on page 235, some of the graphic images. We're talking about original photography. Things that you need to remember about original photography is, one, it can be very expensive, especially if you go with a freelancer who's going to take the photos for you. And two, it can be very time consuming. Don't know if you want to invest that much money. Now the big boys, of course, probably have their own photographer and their own dark rooms and stuff like that. But a small business or even a medium-sized business may have to just go to what's called stock photography, which is on the bottom of page 235. Large portfolios of photos, inexpensive, well I don't want to say inexpensive, but less expensive than the original photography. You get to see what you're buying. It's a quality product. Now, there's just so many advantages to the stock photography over the original photography. But one thing you need to remember about the original photography is if you want the photo to belong to you. That's something that original photography has over the stock houses, is that you would own the photographer or you would own the photograph, whereas through a stock house you might have the same picture displayed that somebody else might have. But it's less expensive and it's a lot quicker. Talking about stock agencies over on 236, we talk about the Picture Agency Council of America membership directory. And what I want to look at in this paragraph is the bottom line. It gives you the website and an email address to this place if you want to go out there and check it out. Then we talk about the classifications of graphics. Now this actually starts on 236 and goes all the way over to 240. So we're going to look at the first one there, backlit transparencies. It's a modest cost, and what I've done on my book in several different places is say that cost is relative. If you're Saks Fifth Avenue, Neiman Marcus, you may not really worry about the cost of these things. If you're a small business owner on the corner of such and such in downtown Statesville, you're going to worry about the cost even in graphics. So when I talk about cost, realize it's a relative term. It's relatively modest cost, backlit transparencies, wishing to quickly capture consumer attention. On the bottom of page 237, they do a profile of one of the industry's leading manufacturers of graphic formats. If you get a chance, take a look at that. Over on page 238, we talk about digital image. And again, I've got a note in my margin that says cost is relative because they talk about the standard inkjet printers. They talk about laser photo imagers, super wide inkjet printers. And then they talk about the cost as little as $6,000, produces good to excellent quality images. You know what? $6,000 to a small business is a lot of money. So even though they say it's an inexpensive format, it's still a relative term. But it is quick. You can refresh those images quickly through the seasons. So there's a whole lot of advantages to it. But be careful of the term costs. Talk about displays, we talk about motion displays, which is fine. Simulated neon graphics. The photo on page 240, figure 14-7, shows us the simulated neon sign for Wrangler. And then we really want to look at, again it's still on 240, figure 14-8. We talk about light walls, comprised of numerous screens that feature moving images. It's a multi-image display. We've probably all seen them, probably more at Belk's. I don't know that we'll ever see one of these at Walmart, but we might. The problem with this is what? It's going to be the cost to this. Absolutely. But right under the light walls, we talk about banners. One of the simplest forms of graphic presentations is the banner. They're low cost. Let me ask you this, will a banner grab your attention? Hopefully it will. And then that's on page 240, 241. We just want to talk about trade shows for 2 seconds. You'll see on table 14-1, the bottom of page 241. They talk about some of the trade shows and the locations. Just a couple paragraphs above that, it talks about trade shows as a topic. Attendance at trade shows is a very popular way to get an overview of what the market has to offer in a relatively brief period of time. I know a couple of you are actually considering careers in this type of industry. These trade shows are going to be paramount to you. You've got to attend some of these trade shows. Don't worry, nothing out of table 14-1 is going to be on the exam. You don't have to know what trade show is and what location. Don't worry about that. But if you're thinking about a career in this, these trade shows will go a long way for you. And then over on 242, maximizing the effectiveness of graphic displays. They give us 5 checkpoints. They talk about coverage of the marketplace. But one we really want to look at is down toward the bottom, called placement. It is important to make sure that graphics of a fragile nature are not within reach of shoppers. You don't want customers manhandling your graphics. I know it says graphics that are fragile, but I'm suggesting you don't want customers handling your graphics at all. If they cut themselves, if the graphic falls on them, and tell me you've not seen little kids and sometimes older men, just pull on them to see if they'll in fact break or what they're made out of. So again, be very careful on your placement of these graphics. And then over on page 243, you have your chapter review, some of the key points. This is actually a good chapter on graphics. The figures are, I think, very good. And unfortunately, when companies are trying to lower costs, this is one area that takes the hit. But you can save some money by going to stock photos. They're quick. You can see it in your hand and buy it. Unfortunately, so can your competitor. But that is chapter 19. Hope that helps you a little bit, and I'll see you next week.